Okay, we are coming to the end of our episodes at PDAC. We have covered a lot of ground. I mean, when we were back at CIM, I thought we covered a lot of ground. There was a lot of communication talk, a lot of tech talk. But this PDAC, we've really got to go on to sort of the nuts and bolts of the industry, while sort of peppering in all the technology. So it's been quite well rounded out. Now we're going to do some underground talk, and we're going to bring on Quattro Project Engineering, Jeremy Palmer. He's also going to be talking about some of the partnerships that they have in Canada. So it's quite exciting. Jeremy, welcome to Mining Now. It's great to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I like the, I like the background.
Yeah, it's good actually. I can't claim it. I didn't have a lot to do with it, but yeah, it is. I agree.
Well, you got a good designer working for you somewhere.
Yeah, we must do.
How's the show? Have you been to PDAC before?
I came to the last one in 2019, and since that time it's been difficult to go anywhere. But we're happy to be back, and we've had a really good show so far. Yeah.
What brings you here? I know there's a new partnership. I believe it's with RockTech that you've been rolling out and have established. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We've been getting inquiries from the Canadian market on a lot of our core paste product range. We developed a range of products in Australia probably about 7 or 8 years ago that essentially enable the operator to de-risk and automate the underground system, which is probably the last area of the mining production cycle where there's some real upside to being able to get some efficiencies and time management and take a bunch of risk out of it. We were getting inquiry after inquiry, but Australia is a very, very, very long way from Canada. And so we ended up sort of coming to the conclusion that to service the Canadian market out of Australia was probably a little bit too cumbersome, and we wouldn't be able to look after our clients appropriately. So since that time in 2019, we've done a lot of work with a couple of people we knew, Sudbury locals, already long-standing servants to the mining community. And over that time, we were introduced to a local company called RockTech, fairly similar in their mindset, similar in the way they go about things. We started talking to them about, manufacturing a lot of our gear under license locally using, their local Canadian labour, local Canadian supply chains. And earlier this year, we decided to pull the trigger on it. And we've had great success thus far. We've already moved sort of 6 or 8 of our units into the market already. We've got a bunch more that are about to come online. I would suggest to you that we didn't get that sort of traction in the Australian market until we'd been, we had the offering out there for significantly longer. So it's actually been fantastic for us to have someone in country that we trust and is doing such a good job of manufacturing our gear.
How long did it take that relationship to sort of, before you were willing to pull the trigger on it and they were and everything like that, how long did that conversation sort of have to go on before you both knew it was the right time?
We didn't draw it out too long. I'm a big believer, if you're going to do something, you may as well actually get on and try to do it as quickly as you can. But probably I would say 3 to 6 months, we were talking. Initially, it's just getting to know each other and getting a feel for, whether there is synergies there. Then we actually shared some of the IP associated with our products to get their input onto it, to check that it fit with their existing sort of capability in their yard. I've subsequently been out to Sudbury, had a look at their yard, and it's one of probably the neatest workshop I've ever been in. From there, I think in any relationship like this one, it's key for them to understand that we were real and that this was actually going to have a tangible impact on their business. So it was pleasing that we were able to get relatively quick uptake for the product line in Canada. So now that we've actually, from a business perspective, they've seen real revenue come through the door. They now have made 6 or 8 of these things. They're familiar with them, actually gotten to the point where they're giving us some feedback. There's some areas of, I suppose, our workflow that now that we've seen the way they operate, I would suggest to you they do it better than we do. So there's been a little bit of learning in each direction. So I would suggest we were talking for 3 or 4 months. We got very serious after 6 months. And then from there, we were actually raising orders and it got real. We were physically making real product.
Okay, so let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. And first up, we've got BitService. Since 1965, BitService has been the solution provider for mechanical cutting and material handling in underground mining. Specialists in carbide-tipped consumables and rebuilding and optimizing cutting heads for development and production mining. Struggling with conveyor maintenance issues? Their team can help with quality conveyor rollers and belt cleaners, improving the efficiency and reliability of your material handling system. Contact them today at 306-653-0988 and visit their website at bitservice.ca. Next up, we have L&H. L&H Industrial can custom engineer and build from the ground up any heavy equipment assembly or machine that you need for your operation. Their worldwide 24/7 field services network is on the job whenever you need heavy equipment troubleshooting, repairs, rebuilds, relocations, or replacements. And thanks to their specialized design and engineering and state-of-the-art manufacturing and repair services, they are a go-to international supplier for improved components and custom assemblies for heavy industrial machinery. Visit them at lnh.net to learn more. We also have Petro-Canada Lubricants. HF Sinclair, which includes the Petro-Canada Lubricants brand, is a proud sponsor of Mining Now. Petro-Canada Lubricants products and services are proven to maximize equipment performance, productivity, and overall savings. From heavy-duty engine oils to hydraulic fluids, ATFs, gear oils, and greases, Petro-Canada Lubricants is committed to delivering innovative solutions that deliver value and keep businesses moving. They have dedicated technical expertise, knowledge, and know-how to help customers in the mining industry operate smoothly with improved equipment, reliability, and performance. Learn more at lubricants.petro-canada.com or contact them at 1-866-335-3369 to arrange a call with one of their technical experts. Next up, we have Fuller Brothers. Help Fuller Brothers celebrate its 60th anniversary this year as the world's leader in providing non-hazardous, non-toxic products that reduce tire management costs for a diverse range of customers. The acknowledged formula developers of the globally recognized Tire Life. Fuller Brothers also produces other quality products such as PSF Plus, PSF Lube Zit, Tire Cream, Dripless Tire Paint, Omega Tire Repair System, White Dismount Lube, as well as select tire service tools and tire painting equipment. For more information, you can visit them at fullerbros.com or by calling toll-free at 1-800-547-7785. Fuller Brothers, we have the inside covered. Last but not least, we have CIM. The 2022 edition of the Maintenance, Engineering, and Reliability Mining Operators Conference, or MEMO, is coming to Sudbury at Science North from September 18th to the 21st for a full in-person event. Join industry peers for 2 days of technical and keynote presentations where you will have the opportunity to learn about many of the ways the mining industry is leveraging technology to adapt to a new world. Networking events will offer a chance to build relationships with other mining professionals. The event also includes a trade show featuring some of the industry's most dynamic companies that is not to be missed. So register at memo2022.cim.org. Now back to the interview.
It's an interesting thing, hey, that you can expand your knowledge base when you create a partnership, and all of a sudden you're sort of drawing on each other, which is probably not, that's not initially what you're, obviously you're going into the business to produce products or push products into the market, but all of a sudden now you're sort of gaining a new knowledge base.
Yeah, it's incredible. Rocktech have been around for a long time. They're a family-owned company. They've got a long history in doing, in the design and manufacture of their existing product line. Quattro wasn't formulated with the intent of making our products. It was a happy byproduct of, I'm a qualified engineer. I'm a curious guy. You just sort of see things happening, and we ended up, inventing a range of products. The process associated with developing a new design, commercializing that design, and then creating a robust sort of manufacturing workflow that is consistent, addresses all of the QA, is something we've worked very hard to do. But to come in and start interacting with a company that's been doing it for decades rather than just years has really been interesting for us, because we can just see things where all of a sudden we have a light bulb moment. We're like, that's how we should have done it. We saw the problem that they clearly saw as well, but because of their experience, they've handled it not necessarily completely differently, but they've just done it a bit better than us. And because they're so willing to share information, we're now starting to try and take a lot of that sort of stuff on board so that, we can get better at what we do at the other end.
There's going to be probably 30,000 people watching this episode. And out of that 30,000, there's probably at least 100 that are trying to work on some sort of partnership for themselves.
Yeah.
And so, you have to ask the question, when you're going into this, how do you match up culture? Because it is if you want to have a relationship with a company, especially Australia to Canada, and just the sheer distance between the two countries, there's got to be a cultural fit there. And how sort of, I guess, two questions. what were you looking for in that sense? But also, how quickly did you identify that in the process? This is a company that we can communicate with.
Answering the second question first, if I can, we identified the need for a cultural fit as probably, of paramount importance, if not the most important, very close to the most important thing. If we're going to, have some success over here, we have to be able to trust, and that's a big word, is being able to trust the type of people that you're dealing with. Quattro is a privately owned company. I founded it myself. RockTech is a family-owned company. They founded it themselves. There's a lot of synergies there. We're about a 200-person organisation back home in Australia. So we're about the same size. And with that comes an understanding. If you're running your own company, I believe the biggest, sort of sales asset you can have is just being genuine and accountable. Became apparent very quickly, and it's important to note that we didn't contact RockTech directly. There was people that were known to us that I was liaising with. I explained to them what I was trying to achieve, and they said to me, having considered all the things you said, I believe you should be introduced to RockTech, which they did, and it became apparent very quickly that they almost care about our product line as much as we do. They were doing bits and pieces of work, as in technical work, prior to us requesting it or even paying for it, and then they would send it to us. And so we're getting feedback on a product line that we're not actually paying them for yet. They became immediately invested. As soon as you sort of see that reaction coming back at you, right, you reciprocate it. You're like, okay, everyone's engaged in this, and I think we can make something work here. And to date, everything's gone really, really well.
It's very exciting to hear, and we got to get into some of your actual product lines here, but I thought I wanted to kind of spend a few minutes on it. Okay, so can let's jump to we got on and discussed the interview just for a few minutes before we started recording. The mine backfill. Can you sort of talk first? Can you talk me through that process, and then we'll sort of integrate your services and everything. But let's kind of talk on a holistic point of view, if we can.
Yeah, sure. In nuts and bolts layman's term, effectively we take tailings material, so what is historically mine waste, we remanufacture, re-engineer it into a cemented paste product that is deployed back down into the void from which the ore came originally. It forms a stable sort of film mass that is able to be exposed both vertically and horizontally, which aids quite significantly in some particular types of mining sequencing. And where we have come at that from, that's not a new technology. Canada's been doing it for a long time. It's been all around the world. Our approach, I suppose, was we identified early that every site we went to, there was a big disconnect between what happened at the surface and what happened underground. And so in addressing that, it became clear that everything underground was relatively agricultural, and by that I mean everything was manual. So we developed a series of products, diverters specifically, it needs to be noted, for paste backfill. We didn't borrow things from other industries. We sat down with a blank piece of paper and said, what are the challenges that this material presents, and how do we specifically engineer to address them? And what that has done over time is it has allowed operators of paste systems to increasingly walk towards a fine line of increasing their solids concentration, which makes fill, in crude terms, cheaper, but not be too concerned about if their whole system stops and blocks up. What our system enables an operator to do is cut the system up effectively, even if there's paste in the line, and flush it out and restart. And we've got a number of sites, particularly in Australia, that have adopted our product line en masse and fitted out, right through the underground workings and made it all controllable and monitorable from the surface paste plant. And a good example of that would be Prominent Hill, owned by Oz Minerals in South Australia. They're a very forward-thinking group. And whilst we didn't design the paste plant, that was done by other people, that plant now, or that system, through the utilisation of our gear underground, has become one of the more automated systems, I would suggest, in the world. They consistently get extremely high volumes of paste down the hole, and all of that leads into a more consistent production cycle where ultimately they're getting the metal out of the ground that they need to get every month.
So the industry, I guess I'll first ask, in the mining sort of environment in Australia, there's a term I've noticed, and now I'm using it. It gets used a lot
It
here,
catches.
though. It's
Yeah.
first to be second. Is that a similar thing in Australia that you see? That sort of hesitancy to be the first one through the door?
Yes, it is. And I mentioned earlier that we've got quite, rapid uptake in the Canadian market. And we didn't get that in Australia because there was, to a large degree, having to actually demonstrate, number one, that the problem was impacting their operations, and number two, that it could be solved. You had a lot of guys who were making their mine run, and in their minds, compared to other, operations around the place, they were efficient. But with the mechanization that it brings, there's efficiencies that, manual labor just can't achieve. All of the activities typically associated with paste underground are working at heights. They're deemed by most Australian sites to be high-risk activities. And so any time you can take out of that, and any mechanical process and automated process you can put in place, ultimately means a more efficient and safer mining operation. And so there was initially some hesitancy in the industry just because it had never really, I suppose, specifically been addressed. We now have mines that just are completely fitted out with them. They'll initially trial the system, and that might not just be our diverters, it might be our pipe hanging arrangements, which we call a Q-claw. All of those, we've got demonstrated efficiencies across a number of sites. And once they start, and once the guys on site realise that, what we find is individual sites just start taking up en masse more and more and more and more, because they are now starting to, see the same benefits that we do in our contracting division. We know, because we put a lot of this stuff in, we talk to our guys internally and they'll say it is much faster, it is much safer. And it's once the clients start to see that as well, then you just get this compounding effect. And I think the reason we're getting, good uptake in Canada is we're not having to prove that the problem exists anymore.
Right.
That kind of happened a number of years ago now.
So when somebody like Prominent Hill takes it on though, does that just open the door to some of these other producers? I mean, does it border on instantaneous, that all of a sudden now you've got, okay, we've done it. We've got this here system in a major operation.
Yeah. Like, with the beauty of hindsight, it's easy to say yes to that question, but it was a slow burn over a number of years. Right, and then there was no magic, wow moment, now everyone will adopt. It's more that, like any industry, the underground mining industry in Australia is constantly looking out for what other people are doing to, sort of maintain industry best practice. Old mines, mines that are existing are still on occasion hesitant because they're set in their ways, they're doing what they do. New mines now in Australia will all just by default, have this sort of stuff in. And that's been an interesting step change. I mean, if you go back 5 or 6 years, that wasn't the case. And now it's more or less being sort of adopted as this is the way you should go about doing it. Now, I'm not claiming that that's a Quattro concept, but what is clear is that whether we've done it or other people have done it, utilisation of products like these and being able to integrate the underground with the surface paste plant, there is an immense amount of benefit to it. And so I think, going forward, it reduces the number of people you need to have underground. It gives the mine operator more security and more confidence that their fill cycle is starting to get efficient and reliable, which is always a worry for, if we talk to most sites around the place that are running paste, all of them will just sort of say, at some point, I've been tearing my hair out. And so to be able to then sort of bring a degree of certainty into a critical system that perhaps in the past had a bit of risk about it, is a very powerful thing.
Let's jump into, okay, actually I wanted to touch on one quick thing that you said that I found interesting is getting a mine to adopt a system when they are already, as far as the industry is concerned, they're already world-class in what they're doing, but it can be so much better. That's a tricky sell, because if they got a major issue, well, okay, we've got the solution. It's a much easier sell. But you're offering a solution on top of something that in some people's perception already is working okay, but it can be so much better. So I was just curious of how you and your team communicated that.
It's, I suppose there's relative degrees of everything's doing okay. You know, we've been to sites before that say, you know, we block our line and we retrieved it in 5 shifts, and that's considered, you know, amazing. We weren't down for that long.
Right.
You know, you put this system in, you wouldn't lose a shift. And so there's relative degrees of where we're doing really well. And I think, you know, as time has gone on, the Australian market is very similar to the Canadian market. We go about things pretty similar with similar people, but people move around a little bit in the Australian mining industry. So you'll often come across someone who has, you know, been part of one of our systems on another site. They move on that doesn't have it. And now all of a sudden there's a process where they start, you know, educating and adopting and so on and so forth. And what we've seen in Australia is, you know, we're up to 9 diverters in the Canadian market. You know, we're now probably triple that this year in the Australian market.
Well,
if you had have told me those sort of numbers 6 or 7 years ago, I would have taken your arm off and not believed you. I would have said that it's just not going to happen like that. So the industry is definitely starting to acknowledge the risks associated with paste backfill, but also the benefits associated, you know, with utilising it. And so now being able to put in more sophisticated systems that bring up, you know, sort of availability, it's something that it doesn't take long for that to sort of spread through the industry. So a lot of the time in answering the question, we've kind of just let nature take its course.
Right.
If a client pushes back and says, not interested, we'll say, okay, well, that's fine. But what we end up finding is ultimately, whether they're, you know, adopting ours or someone else's, it comes around eventually. And I think it's probably staff migration that ends up doing that.
That's interesting. Yeah. No, because it's obviously a huge part of the industry is people moving around. So
yeah,
it's sort of like having internal marketers.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. The audience is going to start booing me if I don't ask about, you've got these awesome videos and graphics going behind you. I keep seeing you're referencing them already, but the QD2, can you just kind of walk us through the mechanics of actually how it's working?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, you know, we're putting cementitious paste down, a contained fluid circuit. And if for some reason there is a blockage or a system stoppage, the chemistry is starting to take hold and that's all starting to want to go off and turn hard. So we initially came up with a dry line diverter just to enable mines very quickly and without guys working in heights to divert from one area to another. But because we tried very hard from day one to design the mechanics of these things specific, you know, to being able to endure the rigors of paste backfill, it's really aggressive, nasty stuff. It all of a sudden became then, well, even if you want to have paste in the line and start diverting to fill in another area, that would be advantageous. If you wanted to crack a line and bleed all of the upstream paste out so that now, you know, a borehole, for example, is a very expensive piece of infrastructure. If something goes wrong, you've got a risk mitigation. You can crack it, free it full of the paste and deal with the issue as you go. We then went to the next level on that and said, if we could have access into the pipe at that point, as well as sort of breaking the pipe, it would enable us to do things like launching pigs for, you know, line clearing, pipe inspection, and even a local flushing arrangement. All of that doesn't mean necessarily that much to people probably who haven't run a paste fill system before. But what it enables you to do effectively is have multiple fill fronts going underground. And so a paste system might represent, you know, a 10, 20, $30 million investment for a site. If we can change its utilization from 40% to 60%, that's a big number.
Huge.
It's just found money because, you know, they've already built it. They're already paying for it. They may as well drive it hard and use it as much as they can. And so a lot of the product development that we did, particularly in our second phase, when we sort of did a round of upgrades, was how do we turn these things into not just risk mitigating pieces of equipment, but optimization pieces of equipment? How do we enable guys up in the paste plant to just with a touch screen change where they're filling, be able to flush while they're filling in another area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the, I suppose, the functionality that people are really starting to exploit and use now, which is quite, you know, it's a powerful thing. It sort of changes the economics of this sort of stuff, or at least makes them, you know, more favourable in the favour of the miners.
Now are you doing the engineering and the actual installation and everything? Is it a full service, or sort of how far do you go into the actual installation of the product lines?
In Australia, we do the lot. So a client will come to us, even with their mining model. We'll take the design string. We'll do all of the system design. We'll give bill of materials, bill of quantities, and then we'll put crews out on site underground to actually install. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that in Australia we've got a remarkable safety record in that space. It's considered a high risk activity, and we've put a lot of thought into how you go about doing this and try to protect the people underground that are working. So we put it in, and we even go to the extent in Australia on about 6 or 8 different sites we actually operate the plant. We operate everything underground, and what it does from the mining operator's perspective is that it takes away the risk of an inefficient fuel system, and enables them to concentrate on the mining proper. And that's become over time one of the bigger parts of our business.
So I wanted to sort of separate out the two. What is the difference in, I guess, we'll say challenge-wise, for lack of a better word, between putting it in a new mine that's being built, or integrating it into an existing, is there an age limit on a mine? If the mine is too outdated, is there a time when you say we can't, or is a lot of what you're doing also integrating into old systems?
Without doubt, it can be integrated into an old system. It just has its challenges. Most of these paste systems at surface are run by a PLC-driven arrangement, and in an existing situation, to put upgrades in underground and integrate them into a PLC coding that, in some cases might be 10, 12, 15 years old, is problematic, and it can turn people off. We'll still have people utilize our range of products, but they'll be standalone. So there's still people underground that are having to go down, via radio comms and actuate the diverters. What we're working on with RockTech actually is the system now where, into a mine that is existing, that doesn't want to amend their paste plant, we're working on a control system that all of the diverters underground feed into a panel underground, so that your foreman, your paste foreman, can now actually control the whole underground network on an automated basis, even if there is a disconnect between underground and surface. So there still needs to be, verbally relayed instruction on what's happening, but the guys down there can now control it all from one point. So that's sort of a next iteration that we're currently working through, and is one of the happy, upsides, I suppose, to working with RockTech. The way that they develop their comms for their equipment is one of the areas that they were just clearly better at doing it than us. And the more we've asked about that, the more it has enabled us to transition over. And we think that, there's going to be real opportunity to develop an automated system underground, controlled underground.
Just to wrap up the interview, I'll just ask you the sort of a professional development question. And in that, when you started this company, you had a couple hundred employees. Now you're reaching out. I assume that you do a lot of global servicing as well. Mine's all over the world, especially in close proximity to countries, to Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So did you have the vision of what the company would be when you started? Or did you sort of started approaching, you wanted to fix a problem? Sort of what was the inspiration for founding a company? I mean, there's risk. When you start a company, you're putting a lot on the line in so many different ways, personal, professional, financial, all those things. So what was sort of the vision and the motivation right off from the beginning?
We in Australia, it's a funny thing. What probably the most respected trait is people who just get things done. And I've always just tried to get on and do things. So with respect to, I suppose, the specifics around what did I want Quattro to become, a company that gets things done, in crude terms. But I always I come from a construction and mining background. So I always knew I wanted to build things. That's sort of what's always excited me. And I suppose all of our product line that you guys can see behind me has come about opportunistically. We've just seen an issue and sort of said to ourselves that there has to be a better way to do that. because we carry an engineering resource, we got sort of 30, 35, engineering technician and engineering team. We thought, well, we can utilize them to develop these things in-house. What we, I suppose, probably didn't quite understand, and that's on me because I was, naive to it when I started, is the size of the market that we could service and create.
Right.
And I come back to the reason for coming into Canada. We would just get people contacting us saying, we would like, to understand more about these diverters and some pricing on these diverters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the team and I just used to look at each other and say, how are they finding out about these things?
Yeah.
Again, it's staff migration. And so, I would suggest to you that the engineering that we do, the construction that we do, that was contrived. That was where I wanted to head. I'm a qualified engineer. I like building things. That happened. The products is a part of our business that has just been a happy byproduct of that, mainly because we've looked at the way things are, happening in a certain scenario. Not many mechanical engineers go underground anymore. And so, and seeing those things and having the capacity internally and the capability internally to address it, we started designing up some products, and ultimately now they're, one of the pillars of the business.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to close with this question: is the graphics going on behind you? I mean, that alone takes work and team communication to get all of that right.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple question is how important is it, do you think, that presentation side of your business? Because you obviously have the technical expertise and you've solved these problems. Do you notice when that video playing behind you, how much interest and added value has that brought, sort of adding that presentation side of it? Because companies try to do it, but it's clear that you're doing it very well. And so I'm just curious, sort of what that gets you, having that, doing that extra step for the presentation.
I believe it's really important. I think particularly the engineering world can get too technical in their explanation.
Yeah.
And mining in particular often is a very practical discipline. We need to reliably be able to get things done, and, being able to convey the message of, we come across people, we understand what their problems are because we do the same sort of stuff, but being able to visually represent how we go about solving that problem, as opposed to getting highly technical in our language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because there becomes, a disengagement that goes on. Whereas when we've got graphics like this, the guys who actually operate these systems, as soon as they watch it, say, I now completely understand what that does, and they can immediately see the benefit of it. Whereas if I was just sitting sort of talking, highly technical, mechanical mumbo jumbo, a lot of people would disengage and not sort of understand exactly what it is that we do. What we find in all of our brochures, all of our marketing collateral that we put together is really geared up to be visually descriptive rather than wordy, if that makes sense, because most of the people we cater to react far better to that.
Yeah, and then but like you said, you've got 35 engineers sort of at the ready that can give all the technical information, so it's backed up by that, and that's sort of the key.
Yeah. Too true. Yep.
No, it's exciting to have you on. And I will say, for me personally, because I'm not the expert in the field, having those visuals, even while you were talking behind, and I was watching, I was like, oh, I'm starting to get this. So I'm glad it was sort of a bonus for doing the interview.
Oh, it's good. It works then.
Yeah, it certainly does. Jeremy, thanks for coming on. I certainly hope this is not the last time, especially with you expanding into Canada and the partnership with RockTech. I hope we get to do more and sort of follow the story, and maybe even next time do actually walk through some programs that you put into operating mines and things like that. It was great to have you on.
Oh, it was a pleasure, and thanks very much for having me. It's been a fantastic trip over here, and I'm sure that you'll see more of us around the place going forward.
I certainly hope so. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, everyone, that is this episode. We'll put lots of links to Quattro. They've just so much interesting stuff that they're doing. So make sure to go check that out. We'll put a link to their LinkedIn and everything like that. Thank you for watching. Please keep on suggesting guests and questions, and all the support we're getting from the industry has just been absolutely amazing. So thank you. We will see you on the next episode of Mining Now.